hi everyone. We have David here with us today from Unity, and yeah, we're really excited to be here. So David, big news today for Microsoft and Mojang. You know, Microsoft announced that they're acquiring Mojang for $2.5 billion.
Yeah, we saw that.
Yeah, for sure. And you know, why are there just a handful of Mojangs out there? And you know, how can services like Unity really help them?
That's a really good question. I mean, Minecraft is awesome, right? I mean, it's one of the best things ever built in the history of mankind, give or take. No, isn't it? And I think I don't know. My takeaway is that genius is genius, and it's sort of a unique animal. But maybe the other thing is that if you look at all the games that have sort of really blown out in the sort of last few years, I think they all kind of share, or many of them share, being sort of created by small teams and being unique somehow. Angry Birds was that. There was like 4 people who created it or whatever. Even Clash of Clans was a very small team when they started it out. So I think that's fantastic to see these kind of mega hits come out of almost nothing. And of course we as Unity try to serve a lot of these developers. Minecraft was not built with Unity, but not just been using a lot of Unity later, which is cool. So I don't know. I mean, it's just it's such an exciting industry right now, and there is this I don't know. It's so hard to predict somehow, and that seems to favor often the smaller teams and the sort of people who are just doing something that's a bit different from what everyone else is doing. That would be my takeaway.
Mm-hmm. And so when developers come to you and they talk about probably wanting to claw their way up into the top ranks at the app on the app charts, like, sure, what do you tell them? What sort of challenges are they facing right now, and what can they do to be maybe a Mojang or a Supercell?
Sure. I mean, I've sometimes said that the first thing is just to be yourself and be really unique. I mean, like not try too much to follow somebody else, because it turns out that's rarely a good business plan. I think it's very consistent that the really big stuff somehow is different from a lot of other stuff. The second is that you sort of have to first be really good at making games, and then unfortunately also have to be really good at getting it out there. And this kind of follows our path. I mean, we built a game engine, and we helped developers build games, and we sort of knew that was a really important task. And we were very happy with the results. Unity is fantastic, and it's being used by 640,000 people in the last month, and it's just unbelievable. But then we sort of realized that once these games had been built, there was this kind of other mountain behind the first mountain, which was kind of connecting that game with an audience. And so we started doubling down on that, and we tell everyone that you got to worry about these things as well. How do you find an audience? How do you help your audience tell their friends? How do you measure your audience? How do you react to their behavior? And so it's a sort of a longer story that's been told before, but we acquired a series of companies, and we're bringing out services to kind of help with that, right? So whether it's analytics, replay sharing in every play, or simply ads. Nobody loves ads, I know, but in a world where 97%, give or take, of the players don't spend any money in your games, if you can find some of those who will not spend money and show them some ads, it's actually a pretty awesome way of making your business sustainable. So I guess those are the big things. Like, first you got to be creative, and then you got to be smart, or some combination of the two.
Yeah. And when we see the app charts right now, we see a lot of titles like Clash of Clans, for instance, they've really cemented their position up there. Supercell has really cemented that spot up there on the top 3. So, how can the others do that? And there always tends to be such a disparity between the revenue made by the top guys and the others, say at position 10 and below that. So yeah, how do indie developers really work around that and bridge that gap?
I mean, it's true, and there used to be a lot more kind of turnover in the top rankings, and I think it's a sad thing that that's not quite the case anymore, because it somehow means that people are kind of able to kind of I don't know, hold on to their spot through various means. But what is easy to forget is that the entire pie has grown so dramatically, unbelievably, unreasonably large, that even a top 10, 30, 50 spot if you don't have a massive operation, can be a pretty good spot to be in. And what we see is a lot of games that come out that have sort of, different characteristics, are just, interesting, different. They can actually find their way up there. So when we acquired this company called Everyplay, well, the service called Everyplay that we're promoting heavily now because it's awesome, what we find is that, if gamers who really like these games, they share moments from those games that they find particularly awesome, and they share those moments to their friends and their networks. And what happens is that, inside this, let's just say 2 billion people who are using smartphones, probably half of them playing games or so, inside that big group, you can find sort of micro audiences with really interesting games, and a micro audience, can be several million people. So I think that's basically the best approach by smaller teams and teams that aren't unbelievably well funded or already kind of at the top.
And in terms of developers and in your interactions with them, what sort of challenges do they talk about mostly? When you look at a small sort of nimble team, an indie studio, what are they really sort of looking for in terms of help?
So I mean, the most common thing is simply that they're flying blind, I think. We've surveyed our developers, and it turns out that the biggest kind of solution for analytics and figuring out what's going on with your game is nothing. That's the most popular analytics engine in our world, which is pretty sad. Because then something happens, this game finds an audience, it works in some parts of the world, it inflects upwards, and people aren't seeing it, so they don't react and they don't learn from it. So that's kind of I think it's kind of banal, and everyone in this room sort of knows, not to be like that, but it's still very common. And once you're done with that, then giving people your players kind of tools to tell their friends is the second probably that people still aren't doing enough. Yeah. And
in terms of, say, again, going back to Supercell, how long do you think a company like that can sustain a Clash of Clans? Like, how long would you predict? How long could they go on like that? Yeah.
It's a really good question. I mean, as a friend of some of these people, I wish them luck. As an industry person, I hope they drop out to like a fly. Seriously, it's better if things, mix up a bit, right? And they're making a lot of money up in that spot, and it's fantastic. I mean, again, as a friend of theirs, it's great. I don't know. I mean, when platforms are new, I think there is a lot of changeability, like in people's tastes. Technology moves fast, and you get this very high kind of turnover. So some of you may have heard me say this before, but it's I was sitting at the dinner with Nolan Bushnell, who's practically one of the founders of the game industry, and he was sort of telling us young ones of this idea he had, or sort of thing he had seen in entertainment, in how different forms of media, different forms of entertainment, have a sort of an innovation cycle and a changing cycle that makes the old stuff outdated. And his analysis was sort of that some forms of media, some forms of entertainment move slowly. So music, say, moves pretty slowly. We're still listening to the Beatles and that stuff, which is pretty bleak because it means if you're playing your guitar, you're actually competing with the Beatles. Whereas with films, it's sort of shorter, faster, and then with games, it's much faster. So I think you can argue that games sort of have a half-life. Traditional sort of big games, console games and so on, have a probably half-life of like 2 to 3 years. After that, they're pretty outdated or old anyway. And on mobile, in the beginning, it was super fast. Like every 6-9 months, you felt these games were getting old. And now, I guess, as the platform matures, that time is sort of lengthening, which, yes, is a little bit, well, it's different, right? If the half-life, the sort of, replacement cycle of the games or the whatever medium you have is fast, it means that the only person you're competing with is the other guy who's also producing right now. You're not even competing with last year's stuff. But as things mature, that lengthens. I think it's still short, but is it 2 or 3 years? I don't know.
And also talking about indie developers and a lot of them having global aspirations, it's very important right now to capture growth, say, in Asia. So what would be the best way for them to work around that? And, with the tools that you guys have at Unity as well, what are some ways to use analytics and things to just sort of make sure you're able to capture growth all over in different markets?
I mean, of course, the first biggest thing is simply that the app stores are very global. I mean, aside from China, which is a bit more complex, you put an app in a store and it's sort of everywhere immediately. Yes, then you got to worry about localization, but there are some really awesome solutions. We're very good friends with the team at Transfluent, who sort of have this API to help you translate everything, and it's super cheap and easy.
So is that a technology that translates?
It's people, but it's behind an API. Oh, okay. So it's a fantastic way of sort of a fire and forget way of getting a lot of stuff translated, and as you change text, they can sort of update it for you. It's fantastic. There are other solutions, but we think very highly of them. So localization, yes, but then eventually. The last point I'll get to later, but first, then we see a lot of people putting games out, and they could be surprised by, gaining traction in markets they never expected. And I think what they should do then is double down and research what's going on there and explore that. Then, especially with Asia and toughest with China, you probably end up having to work with somebody. And we have a service. We help developers take their games into China, and we have relationships with all the app stores and so on. There are other companies doing this, but I think we do a pretty good job of it. And then the last bit is, of course, do you have to really change the culturalization, as they say? And yes, I mean, that's a bigger step. Can you do that as a very small indie team? Not from day one, but if something really works, you need to start exploring that. Bigger companies can do it sort of from day one, I guess.
For sure. And could you maybe share some examples of some indies that have really been able to leverage services like Unity and gain a lot of traction?
So downhill, what's it called? Downhill skiing? Yeah, that's a fantastic. No, it's not called that shit. I forget. What's called the amazing skiing game? Anyway, it must be called downhill skiing. Anyway, it's one of my favorite games, but I'm blanking on the name. They started out being really successful. They actually started out as a sort of a hack week project using Unity. They brought it to iPhone. They were really successful, millions and millions of installs. Eventually, they partnered up with a Chinese company called Yoda One, who then sort of culturalized it a bit to Chinese, and they were also sort of again they had a second major win there in China. That's one. The Matt Finger team in Czech Republic, they do these shooters with Unity. They're amazing. They've been getting them to China through our help, and that's been great. But really, it's just this question of, once you have a game that works, you better kind of go in and figure out, where can you make it bigger.
Absolutely. And shifting gears a bit and talking about indies and console game platforms. So now we have the PlayStation 4 and Xbox One. So, which of those two platforms you think is doing a better job with, working with indies to really bring indie games to console players? Yeah.
I think they're both trying really as hard as they can, and sorry if I sound a little bit political. They're all very good friends of ours. I think they've shown themselves to be very, very excited to be open. We partnered with them to make our tools free for all current gen consoles, which means that if you're a developer and you want to go to any of these consoles, you can just do it. It's pretty awesome. I think it's exciting. I mean, every console now is more open than any platform was until recently, except maybe the PC. Exactly where your game fits, which market it works best in. That's sort of, it's a question of the game that's hard to answer in general. But no, I mean, we think it's fantastic that the consoles are so open.
So Xbox One or PlayStation 4, which one is doing a better job, you think?
Read the news.
All right. We have about 5 minutes here, so I was wondering if anyone in the audience has some questions for David about maybe the future of gaming platforms, or any indie developers here who have some questions for him. Looks like only I want to talk to David today.
It's okay.
No worries, but definitely interested in hearing your thoughts about Unity itself and how you've really been, bumping up all these services that you guys have,
Sure.
Monetization, data analytics, and such. So what is your vision for Unity moving forward?
So, I mean, we started out with this big idea. We wanted to democratize game development, just these 3 words. And we let ourselves be kind of guided by that vision all along. And it's pretty cool how helpful that kind of, true north has been to us to kind of figure out what we should do. It's from that we came up with the asset store many years ago, because we realized, to help developers make games is not enough to give them tools. You also have to worry about their content, the worlds, the special effects, all the different skill sets you need inside a team. And then later we realized, well, it's not enough to create a game. You also have to kind of connect it with a big audience or a good audience, or connect deep with a small audience if that's what you're doing. And so we started exploring ways of helping developers with that, and that comes down to social, it comes down to analytics, and it comes down to ads through to monetize that big audience that is not otherwise monetizing. And we've built some of this ourselves, but mostly we went down and found the best of breed companies. We brought them in, and we're bringing it to our developers, and it's fantastic to see what a positive effect it's having. So as the company that wants to democratize game development overall, that's a big kind of, big task, and sort of never seems to end. But every year we challenge ourselves and ask, how can we be even better at that? And that's how we've kind of come to this conclusion. And it's a really exciting thing. Like, just with this video replay sharing.
What was the idea behind that? Because that's interesting. You can just sort of, replay a particular level or something that you play. So yeah.
And one way to say it is,
what value do you see?
One way to say it is like, sports was different before the instant replay and after the instant replay, and we think it's the same with games. When you're playing games, a lot of the time it's just enjoyable. But once in a while, something amazing happens that you want to remember, you want to share it with your friends, or maybe the whole world if it's like truly unique or amazing. And so to give the developers tools to give that to their players, it's a hard technical challenge. It's exciting, and it's really working. There's 750 games, I think, at this point with this in there. Every few seconds there's a replay being shared. I think the last count is 18 million people have accounts in the system, and they're engaging with not just one game, but many of them are looking at different games and learning about what's exciting in other games and so on. So to be able to give that kind of tool to our developers is fantastic, and working really well.
And you talked about ads earlier, and those tend to be a bit tricky. So, what would be the best way, you think, in games with this little sort of screen that we have and all these ads that can sometimes be intrusive? So what are you seeing in terms of indies and the way they're trying to really figure out how advertising works best on mobile?
Sure. So, the gaming is the game industry is a super competitive place. So you better, have all the resources that you can muster to build games and to sustain the games. And sometimes you need to, buy some installs or push your game through different channels. And if you're not maximizing the amount of money you're making from your game, you're sort of screwed, because you will end up in a situation where you're not competitive, except if you're really lucky, which is not a business plan. Mm-hmm. So to do that, one of the very important things is to be able to earn a little bit of money from the players who are not spending money otherwise. And yes, advertising is necessary for that. And what happens is that people spend a lot of time in menus between levels and so on. So if you can just use a little bit of that time to show some ads, that's already a big step up. And we got great tools for that. It's just called Unity Ads, and people are doing it.
So yeah, before we wrap up, any sort of insights you'd like to share on how indies can really sort of be successful today?
One question.
Oh, perfect. Oh, great.
Sorry.
Brian Grayson, High Res Studios. The name of the game, by the way, you were looking for is Ski Safari.
Ski Safari, thank you. Sorry.
A lot of the conversation has been around indies and indie studios. Can you talk a bit about working with, or goals on working with larger AAA developers? Andrew was talking about that they're still trying to get it right in terms of the 2-minute mark, the 20 to 25-minute mark. Mm-hmm. Can you talk a little bit about Unity's goals with working with those large developers on standalone games and not just companion apps?
Sure. Unity's been getting better very fast recently. We're now in beta with Unity 5, and it's coming out hopefully very soon. And as we got better, like bigger and bigger studios have been adopting Unity. Some of these games are like, not huge games. So for instance, Hearthstone by Blizzard is based on Unity, and it's a fantastic game. And some of these games are really big and are in development, and we can't talk about them. But we always believed that we were not a hobbyist engine or an indie engine. We were an engine for everyone, and we've kind of invested like that. We've built a big engineering team to support that, and we're pretty much there now. There's a lot of console games in development with Unity and so on. So that's sort of exciting. I mean, it's a lot of hard work for us, but otherwise, I don't know. I mean, not so exciting to talk about that. It's just work.
Right. Yeah. So thanks so much, David. This was great.
No, it's a pleasure.
Thank you so much for your question as well towards the last minute. Yeah. Thanks.